pensioners who will freeze to death, but allowing loads of immigrants into the country. I mean, it doesn't take a great headline writer to put the comparisons together.
Because it's the unfairness of it,
It's
right?
unfair, exactly. So what they're now looking at is whether they are going to increase that allowance, the 11,500 income cut threshold, over which you no longer get the payment, or possibly reversing it altogether. They won't do that. And of course, they're deeply worried about reform. Now, here we go. The same line comes out of Downing Street. We had to take tough but right decisions in the budget to stabilise the economy after years of damage and decline. We all know that's nonsense. We all know the £22 billion hole doesn't exist. We know it's all fabrication. Also, the policy, the energy policy there, is expected to save the government around £1.5 billion a year, but 100,000 pensioners pushed into poverty in a developed country. Not acceptable. Then, of course, they're now going to go after people who've been really good and put money into ISAs because they believe these are really a tax-efficient way to save money, and they are. And now they're saying, well, actually, Rachel Reeves' next big idea is to reduce the limit, which is 20,000 at the moment, that you can put in there in a fiscal year, down to 4,000.
Yes.
Who made this up?
Okay, so this is. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it's so intellectually incoherent. So apparently
Will the thresholds remain frozen for 3 years, as the government has already announced?
Well, I would like for taxes on working people to come down, but I'm not going to play fast and loose with the public finances. When a government does that, you get a repeat of what Liz Truss does. And frankly, it's what Rishi Sunak offered in the Conservative manifesto this week, a whole bunch of unfunded, uncosted policies that, if the Conservatives have a chance to enact, will crash our economy in the same way that Liz Truss did.
A startling new investigation into the Chancellor Rachel Reeves has raised serious questions about her expense account when working at HBOS in the run-up to the financial crisis.
The political earthquake has hit harder than anyone expected. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor known for pushing the most aggressive inheritance tax reforms in decades, now finds herself caught in a legal storm. This time, she's not wielding the gavel. She's on the receiving end of a Supreme Court ruling that has frozen millions of her inherited estate.
Chancellor Rachel Reeves has raised serious questions about her expense account when working at HBOS in the run-up to the financial crisis. My name's Tom Harwood and this is GBN Originals. We're going to dive into a BBC investigation freshly published into the works of the Chancellor before she was a Member of Parliament. Now, of course, we all know for a time Rachel Reeves worked for the Bank of England, but then moving up to HBOS, which of course was Halifax Bank of Scotland before it was broken up in the global financial crisis. She moved to their office in Leeds for a regional job. She has previously been accused of overemphasizing her title at that job as an economist rather than working in retail banking, as her CV now states publicly. But that's not the story here. Indeed, the story here is slightly more concerning, indeed, if not alarming. What the BBC appears to have found is that they've corroborated a number of accounts that there was some sort of investigation into Rachel Reeves and two other managers at HBOS in Leeds into their expense account.
While average families struggle to prepare for harsh new tax rules, some facing six-figure bills just for inheriting a modest home, Reeves has been caught arranging an elaborate system to protect her own wealth. Official documents released this morning reveal a network of offshore accounts, trusts, and pension transfers quietly redirecting her assets in ways the average taxpayer could never imagine. This comes just months after she assured the public that only the ultra-rich would be affected by her policy. Yet the numbers tell a different story. A family earning £20,000 with a semi-detached home now faces nearly £170,000 in tax. While ordinary families tighten their belts, Reeves reportedly shielded her own fortune from the very rules she imposed.
In the budget, I delivered the most ambitious package of measures that we have ever seen to cut down on tax evasion, raising £6.5 billion per year by the end of the forecast. Today, I go further, continuing our investment in cutting-edge technology, investing in the HMRC's capacity to crack down on tax avoidance, and setting out plans to increase the number of tax fraudsters charged every year by 20%. These changes raise a further £1 billion, taking the total revenue raised from reducing tax evasion under this Labour government to £7.5 billion.
The backlash has been swift and continues to grow. For months, Reeves framed her policy as a crackdown on privilege, telling voters it was time for the wealthiest to carry more of the burden. But behind the public message, a different reality was unfolding. Legal analysts now say her personal financial setup reads like a textbook case of strategic avoidance, complete with offshore trusts and asset transfers timed just before major tax changes were announced. The Supreme Court did not hold back. In a landmark ruling, justices concluded that Reeves' arrangements were not merely clever. They were deliberately structured to dodge contributions to the very system she helped create. Her estate is now under full review, with multiple assets, including real estate and retirement holdings, frozen and assessed for potential recovery.
Considering lowering the annual tax-free allowance is in an effort to push more people to invest in shares.
In more risky
because she wants to promote investment in British businesses. I mean, well, look, fine, but can we just be really blunt about this? ISAs are, one of the safest ways, perhaps, if you're moving into retirement or you're older person. That's sort of a safe place to put your money to provide additional income when you most need it at the end of your working life. Frankly, some of the people who are choosing to invest in cash ISAs now, they don't have the option of investing in shares because shares can take a long time to show a dividend or return. And frankly, if you're at the end of your getting towards the end of your certainly working life, you don't really have time necessarily to sit around and wait for those dividends or be able to weather, the ups and downs of shares because, as you say, they're riskier. They're not sort of.
What angers people most is the double standard. Pension pots that ordinary citizens spent decades building are now treated as taxable estates. Even a small home in a rising market can trigger a massive inheritance tax bill. Yet Reeves shielded her own wealth using the very loopholes she publicly claimed to oppose. This hypocrisy cuts deep. Reeves didn't just fail to close the loopholes, she benefited from them. She left the inheritance tax threshold frozen at £325,000, even as house prices soared nationwide. She extended the rules to include pensions in taxable estates, even modest ones meant to fund a quiet retirement. More families than ever are now caught in the tax net, doubling the number of affected estates from 5% to 10% in just a single fiscal year, all while carefully planning an escape route for herself.
I got into trouble when I was in opposition. Before they took over, they used to say nice things about Rachel Reeves. A good, sensible woman, and she's still a very nice woman, and good and sensible. She's as boring as her Prime Minister, but that's a problem for the whole government. But she really disappointed me. It was bound to be an unpopular budget. She'd made this stupid promise not to use the normal toolbox of every Chancellor. Mm-hmm. Apparently, she wasn't going to raise income tax, she wasn't going to raise VAT, she wasn't going to raise national insurance, corporation tax. That's 70% of the revenue.
So it was the mistakes in the election.
And she slaps enormous taxes on employers. I would have raised, I think, VAT and fuel tax. So I'd have been hated, I'd have needed police protection. But in the national interest, that's what you're working towards in the first budget. And you don't put, in the present state of the economy, a big tax on employment in the way she has. The farmers, well, I'm rather on her side.
The Treasury's own forecasts had warned what was coming. An extra 121,000 families each year facing crushing tax bills. Builders, tradespeople, savers, people who spent their lives doing the right thing, were now being punished for being responsible. Meanwhile, Reeves quietly moved her assets behind legal protections. One judge reportedly described her setup as a deliberate manipulation of the rules she imposed on others. It wasn't just ethically questionable. It was a calculated strategy to dodge the consequences of her own policies. Now, those consequences are crashing down. The Supreme Court's decision doesn't just freeze Reeves's personal fortune. It shatters Labour's entire narrative on tax fairness. For months, she was presented as the champion of working-class justice, the woman who would finally rebalance the system in favor of the many. But the reality has completely flipped that image on its head.
You're asking the public for 40 billion tax rises. Can you at least reassure people there are no more tax rises after this?
Well, I've committed to just have one budget a year. I'm not coming back to this in the spring.
Parliament.
No, I'm not going to make commitments to never change taxes again. That would be irresponsible. But this is a once-in-a-Parliament budget to wipe the slate clean after the mess that the Conservatives have left us.
Just final question.
Labour's cornerstone policy has become a lightning rod for public anger. What was sold as a measure to tax the rich has ended up hammering middle-class households, while the people crafting the law quietly ducked out the side door. The revelation that Reeves routed her own family's assets while urging everyone else to do their part is being called one of the worst breaches of public trust in recent memory. The fallout is far from over. Calls for a broader investigation are growing, with members of Parliament demanding an inquiry into how deep this pattern of double standards runs. Was Reeves the only one shielding wealth while promoting these policies? Or is this just the tip of something larger? Public reaction has been explosive. Across social media, phone-ins, and community forums, people aren't just angry, they feel betrayed. Many had already begun adjusting their life plans based on Reeves' policy. Selling family homes, restructuring retirement plans, or preemptively gifting assets to avoid financial ruin. All of it was done in good faith, believing the rules applied fairly. Now the message is painfully clear. Fairness doesn't apply at the top. Entrepreneurs are among the loudest voices speaking out. With inheritance tax harsher and less predictable, many small business owners say they've decided not to pass their companies to the next generation. Why bother, they ask, if 40% of everything they've built could be lost overnight? This scandal isn't just about one person's estate. It's about trust in leadership, about how a government can preach sacrifice while quietly making exceptions for itself. It's about what happens when those making the rules think they're too important to follow them. This moment marks a turning point, not just for Rachel Reeves, but for the entire economic vision Labour has tried to sell. Her policies weren't just harsh. They were delivered with the promise of integrity, shared burden, and leading by example. That illusion has now been destroyed. The court's ruling sets a legal precedent that could challenge similar schemes by other officials. With pressure mounting, Labour is scrambling to contain the damage. For months, Reeves framed her policy as a crackdown on privilege, telling voters it was time for the wealthiest to carry more of the burden. But behind the public message, the reality was different. Legal analysts now say her personal financial setup reads like a textbook example of strategic avoidance, with offshore trusts and asset transfers timed just before major tax changes. The Supreme Court didn't hold back. In a landmark decision, the justices concluded that Reeves' arrangements weren't just clever. They were deliberately structured to avoid contributing to the very system she helped design. Her estate is now under full review, with multiple assets, including real estate and retirement holdings, frozen and assessed for recovery. What angers people most is the double standard. Pension pots ordinary citizens spent decades building are now treated as taxable estates. Even a small home in a rising market can trigger a massive inheritance tax bill. Yet Reeves shielded her wealth using the same loopholes she publicly claimed to oppose. This hypocrisy cuts deep. Reeves didn't just fail to close the loopholes, she benefited from them. She left the inheritance tax threshold frozen at £325,000 even as house prices soared, extended the rules to include pensions and taxable estates, even modest ones meant to fund a quiet retirement, and ensured more families than ever were caught in the tax net, doubling affected estates from 5% to 10% in just one fiscal year, all while planning an escape route for herself.
I got into trouble when I was in opposition. Before they took over, so I used to say nice things about Rachel Reeves, a good, sensible woman, and she's still a very nice woman, and good and sensible. She's as boring as her Prime Minister, but that's a problem for the whole government. But she really disappointed me. It was bound to be an unpopular budget. She'd made this stupid promise not to use the normal toolbox of every Chancellor. Mm-hmm. Apparently, she wasn't going to raise income tax, she wasn't going to raise VAT, she wasn't going to raise national insurance, corporation tax. That's 70% of the revenue.
So it was the mistakes in the election.
Enormous taxes on employers. I would have raised, I think, VAT and fuel tax. So I'd have been hated, I'd have needed police protection. But in the national interest, that's what you're working towards in the first budget. And you don't put, in the present state of the economy, a big tax on employment in the way she has. The farmers, well, I'm rather on her side.
Insiders suggest an internal audit could be launched, but for many voters, it's already too late. The damage is done. As the story continues to unfold, one thing is certain. Reeves' image as a crusader for tax fairness is gone. In its place stands a cautionary tale of double standards, broken trust, and a policy that punished the many while shielding the few. Thanks for watching. We'll continue following this story as more details emerge. Don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for verified updates. This has been Britain Info. Stay informed.